Hello and welcome. There's a lot of talk about IT transformation, but this time it's more than just IT transformation, and it's about creating the digital enterprise. How are CIOs in India prepared for this? Because we talk a lot about what's happening in the rest of the world. Well, I'm joined by Arun Gupta, the Chief Information Officer of Cipla, the pharmaceutical giant, to talk about what it means from an Indian context and the agenda for CIOs ahead. Arun, thank you very much for speaking with us. Sure. Arun, so tell us what's happening. The pharmaceutical world is a little different perhaps from, let's say, retail, the ones we normally talk about when we talk about a digital enterprise. So what's happening in this part of the world?
So the pharma industry has been a little slow getting into the digital world. If you look at trends globally on what pharma companies are doing on the digital space, most of them in the early days got started with product specific sites. They created communities around specific therapy areas. However, traction has been fairly slow, and that is largely to do with the stigma attached to disease within the society, where people don't want to talk about what is ailing them. So when we look at what the pharma company is doing in that space, I guess a lot of us are basically testing waters right now to see what is likely to work.
So can you tell me, I mean, you've worked in many industries, including retail being recently. What are the broader trends that are happening, particularly in Indian context? Because we tend to talk a lot about what's happening in the global context.
So in the Indian context, if you look at what's happening within the digital space in the pharma industry, I guess it is not really pharma, it's more to do with healthcare. And there are many doctors, there are many specialists who have started community sites, especially for patients, to give them support, to give them education. There are quite a few already up and running, though not with the kind of traction that they would have expected. So they're still talking in tens of thousands of people following them or getting onto the site. Very few are actually providing content. So a lot of them are passive listeners to a large extent, where they come, they look, they probably go back. You would start seeing emergence of some of the apps which are just beginning to happen as we see. Again, a lot of these are driven either by NGOs or by organizations who want to focus more on disease management, especially hospitals. And that is something which we are seeing as a trend, even in the global space, where a lot of the apps have not been deployed by the pharma companies, but have been deployed by hospitals or by specialist doctors or by societies who focus on those diseases.
What's happening on the enterprise side? Not specific to pharma, but in general.
So on the enterprise side, I guess a lot of them have been inward focused to begin with. Everyone wanted to look at the mobile, for example, on how can I mobile enable the internal organization, whether it is for simple tasks or for consumption of information. Beyond that, if you start looking at social media within the organization, I guess everyone has had an intranet for as long as you can think about. But again, most of them are passive sites. There isn't really any engagement that is happening on that side. And then when you want to take that onto the mobile device, which is where everything starts converging today, because that's what you use more in the day as compared to when you're sitting in your desk, there hasn't been a very smooth transition. So people started with Chatter, which was one of the examples. Then Yammer came along, and then people said, yes, I can create internal Facebook type sites. They get created in that enthusiasm, but participation levels are very, very low.
And that's because there are too many options.
Well, as a person, when you are wanting to say something, when you want to express yourself, who do you normally want to express with? Friends? Relatives? Would you want to do that with colleagues, is the question.
Interesting
because
point.
That becomes more of a professional discussion rather than a personal discussion. We don't really sit in office and talk about our life. We're 99% of the time talking about work. And that anyway gets addressed in every meeting that happens or every email that gets sent out.
So moral of the story is social media is really outside organizations.
As of right now, it still stays outside.
It doesn't.
I have seen a few incidents of interest groups getting together. So like I used to have a photography club in my previous organization, where we used to collaborate, communicate, give tips to each other and talk about where do we go for the last shoot and those kind of things. But then it was nothing to do with work.
Right. So tell me, what's the kind of, I mean, so I've been talking to a lot of CIOs like yourself. So the whole point now is that we were talking about transformation, IT transformation on an annual basis, but now we're talking about a kind of transformation which is more akin to, let's say, the internet age itself and so on. How are we seeing it in India? I mean, again, this is not specific to your company, but as a as a CIO point of view.
So within the country, I would say it is still everyone is saying, you go first.
Okay. Okay.
Please understand, in the last couple of years, almost every IT organization has had challenges in improving their budgets. Everyone is talking about constraint there. So innovation to that extent has probably not come to the forefront as yet. There are a few experiments happening here and there, but nothing really which is on a scale where you can say this is going to be the next big thing that you should watch out for. One of the large conglomerates a couple of years back deployed a intranet with a big bang. I'm sure you would have heard about it. And when I was checking with somebody a couple of months back, they're saying, yeah, that was a great big bang, but after the big bang, there is nothing much that has been there to sustain it. Now the question is, what sustains it? Sustenance is typically about engagement and content. And if you cannot create a stickiness there, I guess it is going to remain experimental to a large extent.
Right. So if I were to ask you the three key challenges a CIO will face in this year or the rest of the year, what would it be?
So I think the biggest challenge that every CIO is facing today is there is a huge demand from the outside and the inside to start consuming agile information. And agile information means when something happens, I want to know it now. And I want to know it on the device of my choice. That may or may not be a corporate device, right? So suddenly you created a big ecosystem of the BYOD with the security, with the information, the agility, and the analytics that people want to do. So when I was faced with this problem, the first question I asked is, great, I can enable it tomorrow. What changes for you once you get it? Are you able to take a different decision? Are you able to take a better decision? Are you able to create an insight which will help you tomorrow or day after? And if none of this is happening, what's the use of that information? A lot of people started creating workflows on mobiles, for example, to say instant approvals. Who cares about instant approvals today? It's not that if I make an approval at 3:45 in the afternoon, the invoice is going to get paid at 3:46. Or if I did not approve your leave on the same day, something's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of these use cases that people are coming up, especially the IT community, to say, I can enable this, I can do this. I'm saying,
has no real application.
What's the real application you're trying to solve? If you're not enabling my customer, if you're not enabling my employee in a significant way, why should I go and invest all that infrastructure?
So that's one. You said the whole responding to the agile.
So that is the first one.
Yeah.
The second one that is coming up in a big way is people are saying, I don't want reports anymore. I want to be able to do analytics. But the moment you get into that discussion, it is all about reports. So it's still the rear view mirror while people are talking, I want to see in the future. Now, a lot of the tools today allow you to do that. The ability of organizations to consume that information is still constrained, because unless people start coming out of that mindset, it is not going to happen. So analytics, while everyone talks about it, it is still some way before it starts making significant impact on an organization. And the third big one, which everyone is talking about, is around how the entire ecosystem is going to work. Now, it means multiple things. You have your customers, you have your suppliers, you have your internal organization, probably all of them wanting to collaborate with each other. And that is where digital starts coming in to say, yes, digital is a good platform to start that collaboration. But at whose terms? The customer's terms, the supplier's terms, or my terms? And unless all of us come to a common ground, it remains an information sharing site. Collaboration really doesn't happen. And that has been a struggle for the CIOs to say, while everyone wants something, can we come to a common ground where we can start creating something? Because the moment you say, I have an internal social network and I want to make it available to the outsiders, my suppliers or my customers, suddenly the CISO will get up and say, sorry, security breach can happen. potentially you can have information leakage. How can I coach 5,000 people, 10,000 people to say the right thing all the time? So suddenly from the digital social has become more of a personal social responsibility that people have to balance when they start looking at this kind of collaboration. And this is a challenge. I don't know if there are any good answers to that. Every set of stakeholders will have to discover what works for them collectively.
Right. So last question, what's the one transformational thing that you've seen in the last year or so, or seeing right now in our context again?
So the biggest change that I have seen within the enterprise space is the acceptability of some of these concepts. In the initial days, CIOs used to fight it, to say, sorry, I will not allow. And I'm sure you would have seen incidents of people saying, you can't go to Facebook, you can't go to Gmail, you can't do this, you can't do that. There's a laundry list of things you can't do. Slowly that's turning around. People are changing, people are allowing that because, so for example, when I was in Shoppers, we said we want our customers to engage with us on social media. If we don't allow our employees to do the same, it's going to be one-way traffic. You would have probably been more like sitting in a stadium and seeing the match rather than participating in the match. And if you don't do that, the organization will really get no benefit except for, okay, now I know what happens. But how are you going to use that event to your benefit? So that's a big shift that I'm seeing happening across industries, across many organizations. And I guess if you look 2 years into the future, you'll probably see a very different world where the digital space now encompasses everything. Starting with apps, which an organization may have deployed for internal as well as external customers. The way information gets collected and analyzed internally. So probably earlier you did not have too many good tools at an affordable price for unstructured data. Now there are many. And people are now able to combine them and get to some kind of scenarios which were not possible in the past. So these are small shifts that are happening, and I guess it's great to be in that space to be able to contribute something and learn.
Right, and I think it's the most exciting time too. I think what you're saying about the way organizations are opening up and CIOs are becoming more liberal is, and therefore fostering more sort of creativity on part of employees and participation is a great thing for organizations, and that must be good news.
It is.
Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.